is coming to exterminate you. All in Arabic, of course, and pretty heavy for a rally in America. It's little wonder the federal government doesn't exactly trust Dr. Sami Al-Arian. In fact, they'd like to put him in jail, convinced he's associated with Palestinian terrorists.
I don't think they have one shred of evidence to prove that. And if they had one shred of evidence, there are books in the laws today that they can put me in prison if that was the case.
But the best they've been able to do during their 5-year investigation is put his brother-in-law in jail on an expired visa.
The reason is that I was not ready to be recruited by the FBI to be a spy on my community and to recriminate my friends and my associates. That was the real reason.
The two men were first targeted 6 years ago after a PBS documentary by investigative reporter Stephen Emerson revealed documents linking them to a worldwide terrorist ring.
Sami Al-Arian's organization, according to law enforcement, serves as the primary support group in the United States for Islamic Jihad. The investigation that I initiated into the Islamic Jihad started from examining materials that I had collected in the World Trade Center trials.
Al-Najjar and Al-Arian ran two pro-Palestinian organizations in Tampa while teaching at the University of South Florida. The ICP, the International Committee for Palestine, and the World and Islamic Studies enterprise called WISE.
The Islamic Jihad's newspaper, Islam and Palestine, listed the ICP Tampa address as one of its main offices.
If that's true, that would mean the Islamic Jihad, one of the most violent terrorist organizations in the world, has an American link right here in Florida, and of all places, a college campus.
We need to have tangible facts to prove those activities. But the suspicion is there, is very legitimate. Suspicion is very legitimate.
But both organizations claim they're merely trying to educate the public, and the funds they're raising, that's just charity stuff.
We didn't give money. I mean, we sponsored orphans, we sponsored needy children, we helped the house of the blind girls in the West Bank.
The INS and the FBI think that's all a ruse. And in fact, what's happening is money being laundered in an elaborate scheme to buy the bombs that are blowing up buses and embassies overseas.
Well, I'd like to see the evidence. If the government has evidence and they can show it to me, and I see that this gentleman is linked to terrorism, you know, I would resign from representing Dr. Al-Najjar.
Who needs evidence? Not the federal government. Under the 1996 Anti-Terrorism Act, developed in response to the Oklahoma City bombing, the government doesn't have to show him any evidence. Just suspecting someone of terrorism allows the government to classify the details, citing national security.
It's very scary. It's Kafkaesque. You could just be held in jail indefinitely based on something that a court knows, which oftentimes is just hearsay.
So in the case of Dr. Mazen Al-Najjar, a non-citizen the government is trying to deport, a man who has also been labeled a possible terrorist, he's really in legal limbo. In fact, according to his family, no country is willing to take him.
Some would say he's not a citizen. We don't have to extend those rights to him. And our goals are to protect the people who are citizens of this country.
If we let our government use secret evidence against someone under the pretext of security, then God knows what they're going to use in the future against their own citizens.
And now, more than 1,000 days into his incarceration, Al-Najjar has become a cause celeb, not just for pro-Palestinian groups, but civil liberty organizations as well.
Free Mazen now! Free Mazen now!
Some are calling Dr. Al-Najjar a political prisoner, but the reality is any immigrant can be picked up off the street for something as simple as a visa violation if they suspect you of terrorism.
The best way to suppress their voice is to accuse them, is to distort them, is to tarnish their reputation. It doesn't look human.
Look, she could spear her own food in the wild. and transform it into bubbling hot bouillabaisse. There she is hoisting homemade sails.
I designed and sewed 2 7.5-ounce red taffeta petticoat sails in Everglades City.
My husband and I had just...
She's the Martha Stewart of the Everglades, and her adventure started 40 years ago. It's also taken 40 years for her to turn this into a documentary. Even this catchy musical score reminds you of June Cleaver.
Here are my kitchen shelves. Orrin designed these out of canvas so that we could hang them up on a tree.
But this happy homemaker took a 3-year sabbatical from housework, making a 3,500-mile journey through the Everglades in a canoe. Good thing they brought a lot of film along.
We went to places that nobody had been for 50, 100 years. That was one of the things. And then we'd go off the charts and be in totally uncharted territory. And that was to me, that was a thrill.
And wouldn't you know it, she somehow always managed to look good.
And with my fingernail scissors began cutting out decorations and ornaments for our Christmas tree. I made this alligator tooth necklace from carcasses I found rotting in the swamp.
From 1957 to 1960, she and her husband just dropped out, just like that, to see if they could make it the old-fashioned way.
It's a once-in-a-lifetime. It's a test. I mean, you can get tired and you can get fatigued and you can say, oh, hell, I don't know if I can make it through tomorrow. But you wake up the next day and things are fresh. The air is fresh, the water's fresh. You see new things that you hadn't seen before. And that makes up for a lot.
It had to. On a recent trip back to the River of Grass, she described canoeing 26 miles a day under attack of mosquitoes and an unforgiving sun.
It gave me a completely different attitude toward life and living.
Forget about Campgrounds of America. At the end of their day, they had to clear the land where they would pop a tent in an area surrounded by alligators, snakes, and wildcats.
Just about to go to sleep, and I hear this snuffle sound. I said, what is that? And the ground began to shake. He said, it's a herd of wild pigs.
They had no guns or tools to protect themselves, just a movie camera to document their adventure and some basic supplies. As for the rest, they lived off the land.
In the 6-month period of the survival trip, where we just went into the wilderness and swamps for 6 months and didn't come out, we caught 800 pounds of fish, untold numbers of crabs, blue crabs, oysters, clams, conchs, and ate all sorts of wild foods that we found.
Her only contact with the outside world, a transistor radio they used for weather reports.
There was a whole 3 years of my life that I couldn't tell you what happened in the world.
She didn't miss much, though. Castro taking over Cuba, Sputnik's journey to space, and the election of Kennedy. But she says it was worth it. Vastly different from today's Everglades, filled with thousands of tourists a year.
The sense of wild, raw adventure is not really there anymore. As one old-timer said to me, the only problem with the 10,000 islands in the Everglades, the biggest problem was when they invented mosquito control. Because before that, only a certain number of die-hard hunters and fishermen and people would be there. You know, only the people who were willing to make the sacrifices to come to this area would be there, and they were the true adventurers.
For the Times, I'm Danielle Serino. They're murderers, rapists, and violent addicts.
Go on that cell, have a seat.
And they just found a new patsy, the old guy a few cell blocks away. He's 64, he's been picked on, pushed around, and robbed. 64 years old, and he'll get out in a year, we think.
If it wasn't for those guards, it would be an impossible life for the elderly.
He's inmate number 182716, and he's a statistic. Eulogio Almaguer is one of 50,000 inmates 55 years and older in state and federal prisons, part of a population that has grown 750% over the last 20 years.
People are spending more and more time to prison, so the geriatric population has increased over the last 10 years, and we have a lot of lifers.
Longer sentences and now longer life expectancies, and the elderly are facing more than just an occasional shove. They also have to endure sexual assaults from younger, stronger inmates.
These people tend to be weak, they tend to be frail, and tragically, very often they tend to be victimized.
They take their cigarettes, They take their money. Whatever worldly goods they have, they will take them. They have no conscience about attacking an older man to get material things.
An older population is now forcing prisons to deal with another problem: health care.
The nurse will be there in a few minutes.